While you'd think that being a Hollywood megastar might come with a certain level of job security, in reality, no one is safe from being fired. That's right, even some of the biggest names in the movie world have been unceremoniously dropped from their contracts for all sorts of reasons. Whether it was for creative differences or it was all about the bank, tons of incredibly well-known actors and actresses have been given the chop over the years. Today we're taking a look at 10 actors who were let go from some of the most famous movies of all time. When the initial Michael Bay-led Transformers films first started to hit theaters, it offered Megan Fox her breakout role, immediately thrusting the little-known actress into the biggest spotlight in the world. But while she would go on to reprise her role for the second movie, things were clearly not all sunshine and roses on set. Even though she was attached to do the third movie in the franchise, Fox was dropped right before shooting was scheduled to begin. But why? Well, the outspoken actress made some pretty unsavory comments about director Michael Bay in the media, discussing his exploitive and extremely controlling treatment of her on set. The then 44-year-old Bay later retaliated by publishing an incredibly scathing letter about then 22-year-old Fox, condemning her behavior on set and claiming that the crew felt the same, though later it was proven that Fox had not exhibited any of the diva behavior that he accused her of. Shia LaBeouf also came to her defense and spoke publicly about how Bay's treatment of Megan made her uncomfortable during filming. Needless to say, tensions were high, and she was fired from the Transformers franchise and replaced by Victoria's Secret supermodel Rosie Huntington-Whiteley. In 2009, when Peter Jackson was getting ready to make his screen adaptation of the novel The Lovely Bones, he initially had brought on the talented and sought-after Ryan Gosling to play the difficult role of a father grieving the loss of his daughter. Well, instead of consulting with the director beforehand, Gosling decided to embark on a very dramatic physical transformation that he thought he needed to embody the role. Thinking that he was too young to look the part, Gosling decided that the only thing to do was gain weight, and not just a few pounds either. He gained a full 60 pounds, believing that the character should weigh 210 pounds. He claims to have done so by actually melting tubs of Haagen-Dazs ice cream and drinking it. Why he couldn't have just eaten the ice cream, we will never know. Unfortunately, when he showed up a few days before they were to begin filming and revealed his transformation to the director, it was clear that they were not on the same page, and Gosling was let go. The 2005 indie romantic comedy Elizabethtown might seem as though it was smooth sailing from the start, but if you were to ask Ashton Kutcher, he might have a few other things to say about it. In fact, he recently opened up about how the movie was a less than perfect experience for him altogether. And if you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Ashton Kutcher wasn't in Elizabethtown, then you're right. He was fired mere days before shooting began. Just as he was getting the ball rolling for pre-production on the film, director Cameron Crowe had his mind set on heartthrob Orlando Bloom to star as the downtrodden shoe designer ready to end it all, Drew Baylor. Unfortunately, the much sought-after British star was already deep in production on the 2005 Ridley Scott film Kingdom of Heaven and was therefore unavailable. Crowe decided to audition other actors for the part of Drew, bringing Kutcher in to read. He wound up winning the role and was immediately sent to rehearsals. Unfortunately, Kutcher wasn't used to the rehearsal experience, and Crowe had high expectations for how he wanted the character portrayed. They tried for a while to make it work, but finally, Kutcher was dropped. Luckily for Crowe, Orlando Bloom wrapped filming Kingdom of Heaven in the nick of time, and was once again available to come on board for Elizabethtown. For the last decade or so, you'd be hard-pressed to find an actor who is more loved than Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man himself, the man who single-handedly jump-started the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is almost unanimously beloved by audiences and filmmakers alike for his charm and undeniable acting chops. But even though he's one of the best leading men in Hollywood today, that doesn't still automatically make him right for every role. A fact that was proven in 2013, when he was set to star in Alfonso Cuarón's space epic Gravity. They got so far into the process that Downey even began testing with the hyper-advanced technology that was required to shoot such a difficult and effects-heavy film. But when he was actually strapped in and they began to rehearse, both of the director and star realized that maybe he wasn't the right man for the job. Downey is famous for his ability to improvise and his loose and playful acting style, Unfortunately, they had to be very planned and precise in every movement and dialogue in order to work with the tech, and Downey just didn't have the patience for it. He was let go from the project, and George Clooney was brought in to save the day. All the way back in the year 2000, Stuart Townsend was a young Irish actor who made a name for himself starring in a ton of well-received indie favorites. But if things had worked out a little differently, his appearance in a 2001 mega blockbuster might have changed his life entirely. Long before anyone realized what a worldwide sensation it would be, Peter Jackson was starting to develop his film adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's famous series, Lord of the Rings. And long before the name Viggo Mortensen was known in millions of households across the world, Stuart was committed to the role of Aragorn, one of the biggest in the entire franchise. He wasn't just sitting around waiting to start filming either. Stuart Townsend was already working hard, having been in intensive training and rehearsals for 2 months. But the day before filming began, he was fired. Jackson said that they simply realized that he was too young to give Aragorn the authority that he required, but it's clear that Townsend isn't over the slight. He's said, "I have no good feelings for the people in charge. I really don't." Probably because not only was he fired from what could have been a career-defining role, but he wasn't paid for any of his lost time either. Ouch. It is now a well-known tale that the experience of making Francis Ford Coppola's Vietnam epic Apocalypse Now is almost crazier than the film itself. So much so that the documentary made during the process by Coppola's wife, Fax Barr, Heart of Darkness, is regarded by some as better than the movie itself. The epic production featured just about every mishap and misfortune that you can imagine on a movie set. So for Harvey Keitel, who was fired from the movie 6 weeks after shooting began, it may have actually been a blessing in disguise. Keitel was originally cast in the role of Willard, one of the main characters in the film, after an exhaustive audition process. Coppola just couldn't quite find the right actor for the job. He had first offered the role to movie star Steve McQueen, who turned it down because he didn't want to shoot on location in the jungle. It was then offered to Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino, and even James Caan, all who also refused it. Keitel finally took it on and gave it his best shot for almost 2 months. Eventually, Coppola fired him because he didn't believe Keitel was introspective enough for the role.
Well, I have some other shocking news to tell you.
He then gave the part to Martin Sheen, who wound up having a heart attack during filming. So we're pretty sure that Harvey Keitel actually got the better end of the deal in that case. While it definitely sucks to have put in 2 months of work on a film only to be let go, there's something even more painful about completing a film entirely and then being fired. Not many actors know what that kind of rejection must feel like, but British actor Samantha Morton definitely does. Because Morton wasn't even really fired. She was notified that she'd been replaced entirely. Now that's gotta sting. See, Morton was originally cast as the voice of the sympathetic AI Samantha in Spike Jonze's sci-fi flick Her, and she didn't just stand alone in a recording booth and say the lines either. She spent months on set acting opposite Joaquin Phoenix and working closely with the director and crew, only to be totally removed from the entire process and left only with an executive producer credit still tying her to the movie that she had been a part of. She wasn't even invited to the premiere, which she said that she would have been happy to attend in order to celebrate the film. Sometimes we just wish that we had a time machine that would allow us to go back and change something that didn't go as we hoped it would, and we're pretty sure that Eric Stoltz feels the same way about the time that he was fired from Back to the Future. That's right, even though we can't imagine anyone else being so perfect for the role of Marty McFly as Michael J. Fox, not only was Stoltz the first actor to win the role, he got multiple weeks into filming before he was eventually let go. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that director Robert Zemeckis received permission from the studio to replace Stoltz with Fox, but because of scheduling, they couldn't stop filming, so they continued to film some very key scenes, including the night of the lightning strike with Stoltz, even though they knew they weren't going to use any of it. The only one who wasn't privy to the information of his firing was Stoltz himself. until they finally broke the news days later. The filmmakers have stuck to the story that he didn't have the right comedic timing for the part, but the cast might also blame his intense dedication to method acting, forcing everyone to refer to him as Marty, being difficult to work with, and being so hostile with Tom Wilson, who played Biff, that he shoved him so hard he left bruises on his chest. Sometimes it just comes down to money. Such is the case for Terrence Howard, who starred in the very first Iron Man opposite Robert Downey Jr. While we won't ever know what truly went down, according to Howard, the production offered him 1/8 of what they originally agreed upon to take on the role, even going so far as to tell him that the sequel would be successful with or without him. So maybe he wasn't quite fired, but they gave him pretty much no choice but to walk away. Colin Firth is one of those actors who can seem to do no wrong, and even so, he wasn't safe from being replaced as the voice of the Bear Paddington. That's right, Firth actually recorded the entire Paddington movie before the creators decided that he sounded just a little too mature for the role, and replaced him with Ben Whishaw instead.
Oh, you don't need to worry, Mr. Brown. I think I've got the hang of things.
Well, after hearing about all these very public firings, it makes us feel a little better about being let go from Subway for sampling the cookies when we were 14. Did the actors deserve their fate, or should they have been given a bigger chance? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep up with the latest videos from Screen Rant.